This podcast is brought to you by Progressive Insurance. What if comparing car insurance rates was as easy as putting on your favorite podcast? With Progressive, it is. Just visit the Progressive website to quote with all the coverages you want. You'll see Progressive's direct rate, then their tool will provide options from other companies, so you can compare. All you need to do is choose the rate and coverage you like. Quote today at Progressive.com to join the over 28 million drivers who trust Progressive. Progressive Casualty Insurance Company and Affiliates. Comparison rates not available in all states or situations. Prices vary based on how you buy. Welcome to Dear Prudence. I'm your Prudence, Jenée Desmond-Harris. Today, we'll be giving advice on whether a type A person can stop doing all the work when it comes to dating, how to fix a lackluster long-distance relationship, and when it is and isn't a good idea to date a person who's recently divorced. Here to help me out is Erika Ettins. She's the founder of A Little Nudge, where she provides online dating coaching services informed by her own experiences and the economics background she used to track her dating results, hone her profile, and convert chats into actual dates. She writes a weekly dating advice column and is the author of the book Love at First Sight: Tips and Tales of Online Dating Success from a Modern-Day Matchmaker. She also gives tons of free advice on Instagram stories, which is where I came across her. Welcome, Erika.
Yay, thank you so much for having me. I'm not going to lie. Someone mentioned before you reached out to me, they're like, I think they may have mentioned you or referenced you on the Dear Prudence podcast. And I'm like, interesting. So I had looked you up, and then not a day later, you had written to me. And I'm like, this is amazing. I'm so excited.
So this was meant to be.
I think so.
Before we get started with these juicy letters, I want to ask you for one piece of unsolicited advice.
Okay. Unsolicited advice in dating or life. If you don't know, ask. I mean, so many of the questions I get about dating, about anything, I'm not an oracle. You know, I can make the best educated guess I can, but ultimately I'm not the person in the situation. So if you don't know, ask.
And if the person stops liking you as a result of your asking, they weren't the one for you, right?
Then you got exactly the answer you needed to get.
Right. And maybe if you don't want to ask, it's because you might not really want that answer. But I'll stop psychoanalyzing the person.
We'll get into it. Yeah, but you're absolutely right. A lot of people live in the status quo because they fear the answer to that question. Mm-hmm. And so they figure, if I don't ask, then I can live in this, momentary bliss, because ignorance is bliss. Mm-hmm. But the reality of it is more information is generally better than less information.
And if you get the information that you don't want, or if the person stops liking you, that lets you move on to the next person. And we all know it's a numbers game. So that's kind of a positive.
Exactly. And you can make an educated decision about where do you want to go from there once you have that information. And if someone doesn't have the wherewithal to ask questions, like simple questions that you're asking, that's probably information you should have too. Like, all we do is collect data points on people. And so you're just collecting the data points you need to make the best decisions you can for yourself. Anyway, that was a long-winded answer to your short question.
No, that's really good. And more advice like that when Erika and I dive into your questions after a short break. Can't get enough Dear Prudence? Then you should definitely join Slate Plus, Slate's membership program. You'll get to hear me answer an extra question every week just for members. With your subscription, you get ad-free listening across the Slate network and unlimited reading on the Slate site, including all Dear Prudence columns, past and present. Go to slate.com/Prudie Plus to sign up. It's just $15 for your first 3 months. Again, that's slate.com/Prudie Plus. Welcome back. You're listening to Dear Prudence, and I'm here with Erika Ettins. Let's get started with our first letter. It's titled, If I Don't Push.
I, she, her, feel like I always have to be the one to do all the work in dating, and I'm honestly sick of it. I reach out first, I suggest a first date, I choose a location, I ask about a second date, I ask men questions about themselves, they love this, and if it gets to that point, I inquire about their feelings and if they want to be exclusive. I don't mind this as I'm a type A person and I'm not afraid to speak my mind, Plus, I've had some success, 2 significant relationships, and in between, I often get to 5 or 6 dates. But if I stop trying, things always fizzle out. But I don't know if I want to meet the one for me this way. I don't like thinking that if I don't push, the guy could take me or leave me. Then I look at my friends who are more passive, and they honestly don't see much action at all. I'm told I'm attractive and I have a lot going for me. I'm a people person, not to be arrogant, but there's nothing wrong with me. Of course, I might not be everyone's taste, but I don't think I'm scaring men off where there's a lack of attraction. I see other women in my range being pursued, and I think I want the feeling of that. But I don't want to wait for it to happen and be alone. Thoughts? Am I being old-fashioned? Also, why are men so lazy and passive?
Okay, Erika, so when I look at your advice on Instagram stories, I generally see you encouraging people, I'm often imagining them to be women, to be assertive, to move things along by saying things like, I've really enjoyed our conversation. Where do we go from here? Or I couldn't tell. Were you interested in a second date? Or haven't heard from you? Did you make it back from your trip in one piece? But there's also something else you said that I'm like trying to figure out if it's in tension with that. And I wish I could remember how well you phrased it, but it was basically that when you're dating, you shouldn't be trying to change the person or shape them into who you want them to be. You shouldn't be saying, I need you to start going to the gym, or you should be less shy, or you need to talk more. So where's the line between accepting the person how they are and doing things to nudge them to be more active in the relationship?
That's a really good question about accepting someone as they are or trying to change them. And I think there's a fine line sometimes between observing someone's behavior and then changing a behavior. At the beginning of any relationship, dating or otherwise, I think it's actually more important to observe someone's behavior. If someone is not taking the lead, if someone is not asking you questions back, if someone is asking you inappropriate questions, we're not here to teach grown-ups how to talk necessarily. Right. And so if someone, for example, comes out the gate asking you a sexual question about yourself on a dating app, and that's not what you're looking for, at least before you've met someone, I don't believe we should be teaching them, hey, now, you shouldn't be asking me anything sexual.
That's inappropriate.
Exactly. It's more cut that off and move on to somebody else who's more respectful, whatever that means to you. Whereas if you are dating someone, even if that means 2 or 3 dates in, and they say something that you're not sure what it meant, or they do something that you didn't like, that maybe you can change on the margins. And I mean on the margins. I don't mean like you don't like their scent. We're not going to go around changing people's smell. You know, that's part of attraction. But if it's one little thing, like they sent you a text with a joke that you didn't find funny or you didn't understand it, then it's worth saying like, hey, I have a really hard time understanding sarcasm. Would you mind just like letting me know if you're being sarcastic over text? That's a change that's doable. And so there's a fine line between those two things, observing versus changing. Now, as it relates to this person's questions, I have a few follow-up questions that I know nobody can answer because the person asking isn't here. I mean, the questions that came to my mind, and tell me if you agree with these questions, are first, I mean, just to summarize the question, the woman asking is always taking the lead and she's sick of it. That's the gist of it. And she's asking, do I need to keep doing that to get what I want? Or can I take a more passive approach and let someone sort of court me? And I'll start by saying it's not all or nothing. Like this can happen both ways. I heard at the end, I heard an all men statement. Why do all men? Not all anything. And I have to wonder if you're going into new situations thinking that this is the dynamic and it's going to be, and then you're actually taking the lead more to try to avoid things. Nothing is all men. So my first question is, do you let them have the time to take the lead? Do you give people a chance? Or do you assume that if they don't ask in whatever your prescribed period of time that you've decided in your head is, that they're not going to? Because I have to wonder, if you gave it another 5 minutes or 3 days or whatever time frame you want in there, would that person have then asked you out or scheduled a date or done the thing that you want him to do? That's question number 1. Number 2, do you ever express your frustration with taking the lead? Because if you start out a relationship, any relationship, with you making all of the plans, it does two things. One, it sets a precedent that you are going to make all the plans. And two, the other person thinks you love making plans. I mean, even in my friend groups, I'm usually the one making plans because I do love it. I will plan, even tonight, I'm going out with a friend. I planned us a cocktail place. I planned us a dinner place. I have a backup place for after if we want dessert. And she knows I love making those plans, but I don't always have the time to make those plans. Sometimes I'm so busy that week that I need her to make our dinner plans. So I'll just text her, hey, Bridget, I don't have time this week to do any research. Would you mind making our plans? And she happily does. But she would never know if I felt that way if I didn't simply ask. So my question there is, did you express your frustration? The last thing I wanted to say is you're allowed to want to feel pursued. Who doesn't want to feel pursued? I don't care what gender you are, where you live, who you are, how old you are. It's nice to feel wanted. I just want to make sure you're allowing people the chance to give you that feeling that you want without jumping the gun and assuming they can't provide it. So those are all of my initial thoughts.
Great questions. I actually saw you answer a very similar question on Instagram right after I sent you this one.
Oh, that's funny.
Like I said, there's nothing new under the sun. You told the person to ask themselves similar questions, but one of them was, have you taken the lead on every date and then why? And I think that one's really interesting to look at. And I wonder if the answer to why is because I'm really afraid that nothing will happen if I don't.
I absolutely think that's the answer to why. Or it could be well, this always happens to me, so I figure if I don't do it. But, you know, as Ted Lasso says, all people are different people. And sometimes it just takes that moment. Because like sometimes, for example, I get a question often from a woman saying, well, I don't understand why he's texting me like, how's your day? Which is admittedly extremely annoying. You know, and he's just like asking me about my weekend, but he's not asking me out again on another date. And I have to tell them to just breathe, take a step back. I believe, I could be wrong. I believe he's warming up the conversation to then ask you out on another date. But if you start feeling anxious and like you have to do the asking, just like give it a minute and see what happens. Then we can cross the bridge if he doesn't actually ask. But not everyone knows the timeline that you want.
Right. So, okay, we agreed that it's not fair to say all men are lazy and passive. But that said, I wonder if this is a common pattern that you see in the people you work with and give advice to, women feeling like they're having to do too much to make things happen.
It is a common theme. And I don't want to invalidate this person's feelings because these feelings are real. I would feel frustrated in that situation also. I wouldn't want to have to make the plans all the time either or push the relationship along. But then on the flip side, what if you didn't do anything? And you just waited to see if somebody pursued you a little. Is that information worth knowing? Because if they don't make the time to see you, you have to ask yourself, well, how important am I to this person? Do I want to be with someone who doesn't initiate making plans?
So in one of your pieces of advice about this, your suggested line was, you know how much I enjoy planning, but I would love for you to plan our next date. Excited to know what you come up with. I love that.
It's perfect because it keeps it positive. It's not reprimanding someone for not giving you exactly what you want. It's saying, I can't wait to see you or see you again. And I'm excited. One other thing I wanted to add, speaking of planning, is I was talking to a client the other day, and I don't know why she was so anxious or reticent to share what she was feeling with the exact person she's dating. But as we know, many people are. And she said to me, well, we have plans Tuesday or Thursday this week. And it was Monday that I was talking to her. And I said, well, why don't you know which day your plans are? And she goes, well, both of our schedules. And then she said, I'm lying to you. And I said, and she goes, it's not both of our schedules. I know I'm free both days. He hasn't told me. And I said, well, I appreciate your honesty with me. And I crafted her a text to say, and it was so simple. It's exactly what you would say to your friends, which is, hey, can you let me know by later tonight if you're free tomorrow so I can just plan my day, you know, or so I can plan my week accordingly, however we phrased it. And she was like, absolutely not. I'm not saying that. And I said, why? And she goes, well, you know, and it was a million excuses. And I said, not only do you deserve to know your calendar, but also anyone will respect you more for putting a deadline on when they can have your available time.
And you didn't tell her to do it in a nasty way. You didn't tell her to say, hey, I'm a busy woman. You're wasting my time. Get on my calendar or I'll be out with someone else.
That's hilarious. Obviously not. I would never tell anyone to do that. No, it was just like, hey, can you let me know by whatever time or whatever day so I can plan my week accordingly? That's something I would say to anyone ever. And so I want to encourage people to say things like that. So maybe the combination of what you just said, which is, I can't wait to see what you come up with. If you could let me know by X day, that would be great. That way you're both saying, I want you to take the lead, but I am busy and it is important to me to get this on the calendar. And you're allowed to express that you're a planner and you want to know in advance. Like that is we are all adults and we should keep calendars. Like that is a perfectly acceptable thing to do. And then you kind of win both ways.
I've heard you lightly chastising men who are like, hey, Erika, I have a date. And you're like, when is it? And they go, oh, it's one day next week, Tuesday or Thursday. And you're like, that's not a date.
That's correct.
And they say it isn't. And you're like, you have to actually say when the date is going to be. And that's not apparent to the person you're talking to.
Yeah, I don't know why it's not apparent. Again, I mean, look, I live by my calendar, but you're absolutely correct. If we were in a coaching session and I asked you when you had it, I would go through those motions and say, when's the date? You would say sometime next week. And I would say, why don't we know what day? Did you ask for a particular date? Did you specify which days? And often they're like, oh, no, I'll figure it out later. No, when is later? And I mean, you probably know this since you follow my stuff. I chastised a friend of mine. He was so brave for letting me put our conversation on Instagram, where he was basically solidifying plans of a date with a woman the morning of the date. And then wondering why he kept getting canceled on. And I'm like, the correlation is obvious. And yet, until I pointed it out, he had no idea. And he is a lovely person. He's a 47-year-old man. He keeps a calendar. He's accomplished. And yet this one thing was lost on him. And now that he's changed it, he has come back and thanked me for telling him, like, all you have to do is confirm it one day in advance. It's not that big of a deal. And I told him he's creating extreme anxiety in women, probably a lot of group chats. And so that could all be avoided. And I appreciated, even though, you know, he got some pretty negative feedback in the comments, which was to be expected, but he took it well. And he's noticed his conversion rate from conversation to date go way up now, which I'm thrilled about. Such a good piece of advice. You're listening to the Dear Prudence Show. And when we come back, we'll be reading more of your letters. Stay with us. Welcome back to Dear Prudence. I'm here with my guest, Erika, to answer your letters. So our next question is titled, Feeling Unhappy.
I'm in a new long-distance relationship with my boyfriend, and I'm struggling to be happy. Since we started dating, I feel like I don't know how he feels anymore. Anytime that I miss him, I feel he doesn't feel the same way. He's very nonchalant and not romantic, so how do I express this to him? How do we keep the romance between us?
Erika, tell me a little bit about your dating coaching, because I know you work with people in the early stages on the apps and during those initial dates. But do you continue to coach your clients during the thick of a relationship and even at the end of a relationship? At what point does your work end? And do you ever encounter a point where you're being asked to give advice on whether to fix something or break up?
Most of the advice I give comes in the early stages. So getting to a date, getting on the date, the first few dates, exclusivity, when to be exclusive, how to be exclusive. And then, of course, I drop off. And that's as people get happy. They're like, Coach, what do I need that for? You know, but then I often do come back when a client, it's often on the shorter relationships, you know, a few weeks, maybe even a few months, where they're not sure what to do. It could go either way. And they sort of need a sounding board to know, is it something that's fixable or is it not working for me? And then, yes, I do guide people through ending relationships. Again, not usually long-term relationships. It's usually a few dates or even a few months. But I do guide people through, should we end this relationship? And if so, how?
I think this letter is such an interesting reminder that everyone wants to get dates. Everyone wants to get second dates. Everyone wants to get to exclusivity. And you can get there and it can still suck.
I mean, my first question that came to my mind was, are you happy more or less than 50% of the time? Because if you're unhappy more than 50% of the time, I have to wonder if a relationship is worth it. And that's actually a question I ask people a lot. I sometimes also ask, when you're not with this person, which in a long distance relationship is exacerbated because you're very rarely with this person, how do you feel? Do you feel anxious? Do you feel happy? Do you feel validated? Do you feel sustained? Do you feel fill in the blank adjective? And if the answer is no, I'm only happy when we're seeing each other, then I have to wonder, is there something we can do when you're not seeing each other that would make you feel better? Or is it just not the right relationship because your communication standards are different?
I like that better than my initial approach, which was to kind of analyze the boyfriend's behavior. Does it sound like he's checked out? Does it sound like he's mentally broken up with her? Is he not putting in effort? I think all the answers to those questions are probably yes, but a healthier way of looking at it for the letter writer is, as I think, to ask, am I happy? Do I see a possibility of getting happier? And it seems to me that this person does not feel wanted or loved.
Exactly. And then, my follow-up questions here are, has there been a change? It sounds like there has been, but that wasn't clear for me from the question. Like, has there been a change in the frequency and the kind of communication? Because if nothing has changed, yet her feelings have grown and she feels more attached and now she wants more, that's one thing versus he has pulled back, which is a completely other thing. There was also a word I wrote down. She said, I feel he doesn't feel the same way. And that to me is an assumption. I don't know how he feels. Yeah, our gut is usually correct. But if you feel that he doesn't feel the same way, I want you to ask how he feels. Presumably you've slept with this person. I always find it interesting how vulnerable we can be with our bodies and not with our words. We're naked together, which is maybe the most vulnerable, yet we can't say, how are you feeling about things? And I don't even mean to be facetious when I say that. And so I would just get on the phone or a FaceTime, even better, something where you can see each other's faces in the absence of being able to see each other in person, and kind of do like a state of the relationship, like a state of a union, a state of the relationship. How are we feeling about things? Are we seeing each other often enough? I've noticed there's been a change in sort of the cadence of us expressing ourselves, of texts, of calls. I just want to see what's going on. That way it's not accusatory. It's not saying, you're not giving me this. It's saying, I'm opening the door for you to tell me how you're feeling. And that will start the conversation.
And if he says, oh, I do love you and I see a future, but I'm not emotional. I don't like to talk on the phone. I'm like she says in the letter, he's very nonchalant and not romantic. Those are the words that stuck out to me, nonchalant and not romantic, because I do think you can lead someone like that through a relationship and to the next stage of commitment. But I just want the letter writer to ask herself whether you want to end up like all the women who are posting on social media after Mother's Day complaining that their husbands did absolutely nothing for them. Because those qualities, and it seems like you think they're fairly permanent qualities about him, won't change. So forget, does he want more with you? Do you want to be in a relationship with someone who doesn't express himself and may never?
I love that you asked that question because it's so similar. I mean, we get, I get questions all the time, like he's not texting, he this, he that. How does he feel about me? I love that you just said that, which is, who cares? If you're not getting what you need, how do you actually feel about him? And so in that conversation that I would start, I would also express what you need to be happy. If that is a text every day, which is not a lot to ask, then so be it. Once you express your needs, then it's up to the other person to do those things or not do those things. So for example, if you say, in order to feel loved, I really need a good morning and a good night text and, a quick 5-minute call every day. I need that for me to feel connected to you. Now, if he said he's got a few options, he could say, never going to happen, in which case you're not going to be happy.
Yeah.
He could say, absolutely, I'll do it. Now, let's go down the tree diagram. Okay, so you express it. He says, no, you're out. He says, yes, I'll do it. Now, under the yes tree is he actually does it. Great. Everyone's happy. Love, you win. Under that tree, yes, I'll do it. He doesn't do it. Okay. Then it's up to you to decide for yourself how important that thing is to you.
Right.
Fully knowing you've expressed that you want it and he cannot give it to you.
And that's when you go back to figuring out what percentage of the time you're happy and not
Correct.
happy.
I want you to feel happy. I want you to feel loved. And it's really hard when someone is not physically there to give you affection. So if you're not feeling affection in some other way, it might not be the right relationship for you, because I want you to feel happy at least 50% of the time.
Yeah. And let me say, the little rant I do most often in my column and on this podcast is that I hate that so many people have heard the advice that relationships take work, because it's true that they take work, but we haven't done a great job defining what that work is. And I worry that someone like this letter writer thinks, well, yeah, this is hard. Yeah, I have to beg him to text me. Yeah, I have to pull emotion out of him and try to convince him to be romantic, but that's just work. And I don't think that's the kind of work we're talking about, right? We're talking about being considerate, being thoughtful, compromising sometimes, not trying to beg and force someone to be the partner you want them to be. That's not the kind of work I think anyone needs to be doing.
I agree with all of that. All you can do is express your needs. Someone can meet them or not, and then you decide what works for you.
Exactly. You're listening to the Dear Prudence Show, and when we come back, we'll be reading more of your letters. Stay with us. Welcome back. You're listening to Dear Prudence, and I'm here with Erika Ettins. So our next question is titled, Not the Other Woman.
I am involved in a very messy situation. I had an affair with a married man 33 years older. I'm 25, he's 58. I didn't go out looking for it, but one thing led to another. He'd been having marital problems for several years. He described his wife as being a good person, but someone who is a spectator in life rather than a participant. They are like housemates who sometimes have sex, but there is zero affection. He told me she had several mental health issues, and she was also an alcoholic. I felt like we were both giving each other what we both were lacking: love, connection, excitement. He said he wanted to marry me. Subsequently, my parents found out. Even though I'm 25, I'm still living at home. My dad lost it and called both him and his wife. He told her everything. She then phoned me. It became very messy. I also found out from her that he hadn't necessarily told the truth about her. We said we'd take a break because there is just too much drama. I am really heartbroken at how things turned out and over my parents meddling in my life the way they did. I wanted more time with him. I'm sorry his wife found out because I didn't want her to be hurt. I'm not a bad person. I never sought an affair, but I grew to love this man. I'm sorry that finding out about this has caused his wife to be hurt. I don't know what to do going forward. I just feel like I can't let him go.
So obviously it doesn't take a professional dating coach to know that this is a shitty, painful, toxic situation. How do you convince someone of that? How do you convince someone to get out of a situation like that and to want more for themselves?
I mean, like you said, it doesn't take a professional or an expert to say that this is not endgame.
Right.
I'll start with some empathy. I feel for the person asking the question. I do believe she wasn't seeking this, and she fell in love. And I feel for her in that way, because heartbreak, whether the person's cheating or this, that, and the other or lying, is hard. And now add to that drama and your parents getting involved. That's like triple. Yeah, that's like the trifecta of heart. I don't know what that is.
Yeah.
Everything I say is going to sound cliche. You know, this wasn't the person for you. I think with some time and space, she'll learn that. She'll realize that. And she'll find someone who has the time and the energy and capacity and is not married.
Yeah.
Who wants to give her everything she wants. I mean, I'm going to say this on the record. He was never going to leave his wife. We've seen enough movies. We all know that. Okay. But I understand that when you're in a situation, you cannot see, you have laser focused vision. You cannot see beyond that situation. I don't know what to address here. I don't know whether to address the affair. I don't know whether to address the parents getting involved. I don't even know where to start with this. And so maybe I don't address any of it. Maybe it's just time. Look, I don't know her financial situation, nor is it my business, but it sounds like it is time to cut that cord with the parents, perhaps move on her own if she can financially, and start fresh. Take the time you need, take all the time you need to lick your wounds and get yourself in a place where you feel like you're a whole person again. And now you know what love can feel like. Now I can't wait for you to find somebody who can accept that amount of love free and clear.
Right. If this felt so amazing, imagine how amazing it would feel to feel this kind of love with someone.
Exactly. But that's all cliche. I wouldn't want to hear that advice if I were in the situation either. It really needs time and space. You don't need this kind of drama at 25, at any years old. And so I am sorry it went the way it did. Obviously, any breakup is difficult, but I would cut your losses now. I would have no more further communication with this man, with his wife, and I would move on.
Yeah, as far as no communication, I think to enforce that, my advice would be to delete, block, silence, mute, whatever you need to do so that you can't reach him. And I know that feels very hard because you still love him. So what I will let you do is tell yourself that if you still have feelings in a year, you can contact him again, but give it a year.
You're nicer than I am.
My belief is that during this year, she'll have some experience that will make her not want to. But I think it might take that escape hatch for her to do the initial blocking. Have a friend do it. You need an accountability partner here to make sure you're not reaching out to him. You need to have a friend who you can call every time you want to call him, who's going to be patient with you and listen to you and not be judgmental of you.
Also, one other thing. Anyone who speaks ill of an ex, or in this case, a current partner, I would think about, because you have to assume if they speak ill of that person, in this case, it sounds like there were some half-truths in there, you have to assume that they will speak ill of you one day. And that is not the type of person you want to be with. And I understand that he was saying all of those things, one, for him to make you believe that he was going to leave her and that she wasn't a good person. And he was trying to alleviate both your guilt, if you had any, and his in doing that. Well, she's not a good person anyway, so it's fine. But I want you to keep your ears perked. If somebody does that again, where they say, well, my ex is not a good person, or this or that, I'm not saying it's an automatic no, but it's worth keeping in mind, because we have to listen to what people say. And if someone does speak ill of an ex, that is like a red flag enough to at least keep your eye on. Because I assume if someone speaks badly of someone, they'll speak badly of me one day if I displease them in some way.
I think my last idea on this is there's a lot of concern in the letter about whether I'm a bad person and whether I intended to do it, whether I hurt the wife. And those are obvious things that one would think about in this situation. But I wonder if it's helpful to take the focus off of whether you're bad, whether you're breaking the rules, whether you're unethical, whether you should be judging yourself, and try to put it more on how you want to feel. Those thoughts are going to happen, but I don't know if they're the thoughts that are going to motivate you to get into a better situation.
Yeah, of course. It doesn't help moving forward. And remember, if you were feeling those thoughts the entire time you were with this person, regardless of how happy you were or how in love you were, it was always sprinkled with a little self-doubt or a little guilt or whatever word you want to call it. You know, that's not how you want to live your life either. So it's a moot point whether it was right or is wrong, or the guilt or the ethics, because now we have to look, okay, this happened. We cannot take it away. It happened. And so we have to think to ourselves, what do we want to do going forward?
What can we imagine it would be like to be in a relationship without the sprinkle of self-doubt, without the parents being involved in the drama, without the guilt about hurting people? And just let yourself sort of just imagine that. All the love and none of the many fewer of the negative and hard feelings.
We didn't even touch on the age difference.
Oh, yeah.
So there's a 33-year-old age difference. Now, there is no right or wrong when it comes to an age difference, but that is a completely different generation. And I do believe there was probably an element of safety in that. You felt maybe safe or protected by him. Maybe he was another father figure to you in some subconscious way. You are going to have more in common with somebody in your own generation. And it might feel like you don't have a net under you anymore if you date someone with more uncertainty. Who knows? Maybe you like the situation because it was never, who am I to predict? I don't know. But that is quite a large age difference. And I'd like you to have some childhood references in common with someone.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe if you mention a show you watched when you were 5, they might also know that show.
Yeah.
Maybe if you say some of the Gen Z lingo that, one of my friends from the gym is teaching me, which I think is all a little ridiculous, maybe someone you're dating will understand it. And so I do think there's something to be said for eventually when you feel like you're in a place where you can start dating again, to look for people in their 20s, maybe 30s, to just see who's out there and see who you can relate to as you.
And last thing about the letter writer's age, you're so young, you're 25, but the years are going to go by fast. And I think the easiest way to look up and say, oh, I'm scared because I'm at the end of my reproductive years and I haven't met anyone, and it seems like my friends are married, is to waste a lot of years in situations that are not working for you and not going anywhere. You are young, but you're going to be non-young in the blink of an eye. In the blink of an eye. You just don't want to look back and say, oh yeah, I spent 8 years with this older married guy who was causing me so much stress and drama, but I really loved him. Like, those are 8 years that you could have been finding someone who would actually work for you. And time goes by really, really, really fast.
I hate the concept of wasted time. Like, I do think any relationship was worth the time you were in it because you enjoyed yourself in it. And this conversation aside, just like, I don't like going back and thinking, oh, that was 5 years wasted. Because that's a really negative way of looking at things. I think in this situation, in any relationship, you learn a lot, and you were in it for as long as you needed to be in it until you were ready to be out of it. So I just have to just maybe disagree a little.
No, that's fair.
Yes, 25 is a great age to just have so many more experiences in front of you, whatever those experiences are.
Thank you so much, Erika. It was really great talking to you.
Thank you.
Those are all the questions we have for this week. It's been fun and hopefully helpful. For more of Erika's dating advice and coaching, visit her website at alittle.nudge.com or follow her on Instagram and Twitter at @alittle_nudge. Do you need help getting along with partners, relatives, coworkers, and people in general? Write to me. Go to slate.com/Prudie. That's slate.com/PRUDIE. The Dear Prudence column publishes every Thursday.
If you'd like to hear your question answered on the podcast, we're looking for letter writers who would be comfortable recording their questions for the show. You can stay anonymous.
Dear Prudence is produced by Se'era Spragley Ricks and me, Jenée Desmond-Harris, with a special thanks to Maura Currie. Editorial help from Paola De Verona. Daisy Rosario is senior supervising producer, and Alicia Montgomery is Slate's VP of audio. I'm your Dear Prudence, Jenée Desmond-Harris. Until next time.
The sizzle of McDonald's sausage. It's enough to make you crave your favorite breakfasts. Enough to head over to McDonald's. Enough to make you really wish this commercial were scratch and sniff.
And if you're a sausage person, now get 2 satisfyingly savory sausage McGriddles, sausage biscuits, or sausage burritos for just $3.33. Or mix and match. Price and participation may vary. Cannot be combined with any other offer or combo meal. Single item at regular price.
Ba-da-ba-ba-ba.